with this talk. It's not, yesterday we had our 250th, celebration or demise, whatever. So hopefully this will come together after I get done talking. So joy is an act of resistance. So I've been thinking about this song. There's this group that I like. Obviously, I like music. So there's this band that I watched on Peaky Blinders called, they had Never Fight a Man with a Perm. And it's the scene where Oswald is in there and he's doing his fascist talk or whatever. And there's a song called I'm Skunk. And it's called by a band called Idols. And they have a bunch of other songs and stuff, but there's one that's called Joy is an Act of Resistance. And this quote has been in my head for probably about a year. And it got me thinking, what exactly is that? What does it mean? What does it mean in context compared? It made me think of where we are right now as people in our nation and as, just as normal people. So as I delved further into the abyss of rabbit holes, I found more about this quote. And so it began with poet and author Toy Dercott, and I don't know if I'm for sure pronouncing her name wrong, but Joy is an Act of Resistance. And it's a poem about African American women. And the poem is it's interesting, and I just found it over there because I was like doing more rabbit holes. So it basically is talking about a trip across the Atlantic and stuff like that. So if you really want to read it, read it. It seemed like a really good poem. I didn't have time to read it this month. But anyways, I digress to my talk. Joy is an act of resistance. When I first encountered the quote from the Idol song, I found myself returning to it again and again. At first, it seemed simple. Joy is something we experience when life is good. Resistance is something we practice when life is difficult. Yet Derricott places those ideas together in her poem. As I reflected on that question, I realized that joy is not simply an emotion that arrives when circumstances are favorable. Joy is something that people intentionally create and protect. It is something that communities nurture, especially when times are hard. History offers countless examples of this truth. Community did not wait for perfect conditions. When I began looking at this, examples of joy in difficult times, I noticed a pattern. Community did not develop just because everybody's happy and like, oh, we're going to tiptoe through the tulips. It came when times were hard, and there's perfect examples of this all the way to the beginning of our country. The Native American, indigenous people have been here for years, and they had their lives ripped from them, but they still have a community with powwows and whatever life they can that was taken from them by us or our ancestors. And then, especially during the civil rights movement, the African American experience is something that is indescribable. It's something that people don't really understand or take the time to understand. Basically, it's a part of our culture that was derived from scraps. That soul food is a term that is coined from Southern food, but it was basically from scraps that were given to them because they didn't have anything else to eat, and they had spices that they brought, and seeds that were in their cornrows were developed from people putting seeds in their hair across the ocean on the ships. And that's how we got our root vegetables. We wouldn't have okra, we would not have squash, we would not have turnip greens if it wasn't for the seeds planted in cornrows in people's hair. And so there's a lot of stuff that we really take for granted that we never really have thought about. And then during the civil rights movement and the sit-ins, it was more than just sitting. These people went through training to learn how to be able to have slurs and things thrown at them that were inexcusable and unimaginable. And it was more than just just them doing stuff and sitting in and protest. There was a whole movement behind it. But it didn't just start there. It was when people went to church, people doing simple acts, going, living their lives, coming together as a community and coming together, going to vote despite being, taunted and have things thrown at them, going to schools during desegregation, coming together as a community and allowing their children to have the same experiences that we as have never really had to experience. But so joy helps sustain them because that was literally all they had. All they had was community. They had to find it in something other than just devastation. And so this pattern is not limited to any, it's not necessarily reflective. It's basically any immigrant that has came to our country, that has came without nothing, that had to start from the beginning. All they had was community. And so what resistance really means. I think this is where the word resistance becomes important. When we hear that word, many of us think of protest movements or public acts of courage. Those forms of resistance matter, but there's another kind of resistance that happens every day. It is the refusal to become indifferent. It's the refusal to allow fear to turn us away from one another. It's the decision to keep showing up for our families, neighbors, our congregations, and our communities. Joy is not, in this sense, it is not denial. Joy does not pretend suffering does not exist. There's still kindness worth offering. There are still loving people in the world, and community makes that possible. Left alone, it is easy to become discouraged. Together, we remind each other who we are. Together, we can carry hope when someone else cannot. Together, we keep the light burning. Last week, we had Stonewall. The community right now, the LGBTQIA community is really facing a lot of hardships as far as like having, their marriage. We take for granted having a partner. We take for granted the fact that I can leave my house to my husband and not have anything to worry about, or he can do the same for me. Or Lord forbid, the end of life comes, him being able to make the decision about my wishes. That is a very real reality now. And, we tend to think, 51 years, that wasn't that long ago. Stonewall was a pretty big thing, but the community, we have a month dedicated to Pride, and I think that we tend to forget it's all happy and everything, but there's a lot of context that goes into that. There's a lot of, they had to come together as a community. We had to come together as a community to help make their lives visible, to account for change. A reflection for this moment. As we gather just after Independence Day, many of us have mixed feelings about our country, our communities, and our future. We live in a time where division often feels louder than connection. It can be tempting to focus only on what is broken. Yet, history offers another lesson. The people who endured hardship before us did not wait for perfect circumstances before they built community. They did not wait for certainty before they practiced compassion. They did not wait for agreement before they cared for one another. They simply kept showing up. Perhaps that is one of the most powerful acts of resistance available to us today. Not grand gestures, not heroic acts, but the daily choice to remain connected to one another and to the values that fully make us human. So now to turn to a different point. I have had this poem by Dylan Thomas in my head for weeks. And it kind of reminds me of UU in a way, because, we light our chalice, and UU has had a history that's gone probably back since the founding of our country. And, lighting the chalice flames, there were a lot of people, especially whenever you think of World War II and helping, Jewish people escape, the concentration camps. And especially after Rachel's talk a few weeks ago, that was pretty amazing. I'm kind of piggybacking on several talks that we've had over the last few weeks. So I'm just going to quote this poem because I don't know how it ties in, but it makes sense to me. So there you go. I think I got a copy. Give me just a second. We're having technical difficulties. Okay. Do not go gentle into that good night by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though men at their end know dark is right, because their words have forked no lightning, they did not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright. Their frail deeds might have danced in a green day. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang in sunlight and learned too late, they grieved on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who are with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there on that sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. So the context of that for me is, we feel like we are in a hopeless situation. We feel like this is, and I'm not saying that things can't get worse, because who knows what it is like in this, we've never been in this kind of situation where we've really had to really think about the direction of where we're going and where we're going to be in a few years. But joy isn't a result of easy lives. It's something that people intentionally create and protect. And again, history shows us that community didn't wait for current conditions. It didn't wait for perfect conditions. It didn't wait for everything to be right. People choose connection. They choose compassion. They choose to keep showing up for one another. And in doing so, they preserve something essential about what it means to be human. Joy isn't what's left when hope is gone. It's something that we cultivate through community, compassion, and empathy to keep moving forward. And I think that given, even though we're small, but we're pretty fierce, we have a lot of good in this room. I honestly can say that I felt more love in this room than I have in a whole church full of, counterparts. So I think we have something really beautiful here in this community, and that is the end.